All right, we're back. So we're going to do this shot of Jennifer. And I'm going to work a little bit more in my palette just so you can see it. And that's titanium white, alizarin crimson, the transparent orange. Those are all the same. And then these two, which I won't use too much, but I use some, the viridian and ultramarine blue. And then sometimes I use a little bit of this if I need a nice bright red, like lipstick or a hot red shadow someplace or something like that. And then I'm adding black in. That way I can get earth tones really quickly. And I don't have to work so hard. Okay, and I'm just going to lay this in quite quickly. And oftentimes I'll create a little bit of gradation there. I'm just creating more pigment, but I'm only going out of the transparent orange, so it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. I'm not going to do it as bright as the other. I'm going to keep this much more tonal. So we can focus on some of the more finished techniques. I can render a little bit more and not be quite so focused on color theory. Okay, so let's put that away. Now I'm just going to take a paper towel. Now notice as a impressionist or expressionist, I could do the same thing as a tonalist, but I could put a really bright color here, and I'll do that sometimes. I did it with the yellow that earlier demo yesterday or whenever it was. I think it was yesterday, and made a really bright golden torso painting. That one with her arms across her chest. So I can use a really bright whatever color, and start with that as a base, and then that's going to. The good thing is those colors then key all the other colors to some extent. I'm wiping off the little bits of paper that have come off that surface. But also then you have to fight it a little bit, especially if it's wet like this is. This is going to now dirty up any really light colors I put on unless I'm pretty thick with it. And if I put a bright green there and I'm trying to get some kind of warm flesh, it's really going to fight those oranges and reds. So you have to be careful when you do something like that. It can create all sorts of both possibilities and problems. All right. So now I'll use this same bit here. And I'm trying to see where I go with this. And oftentimes when I'm drawing something, I might do it here. We'll see. It takes me a couple times to figure out the composition, how big it's going to be. And so I might lay this in and draw it, and then I'll get down to the to starting to put in the hips and legs. I'll realize, no, that's too big a head. And so I want to draw the whole thing a little smaller instead, and I'll scrub it out and work it out in a different scale or a slightly different position on the canvas. Thin that out a little bit so it moves a little more lubricated. Okay. And then I lay that in. And when you lay things in, you'll go down the long axis, get that nice fluid curve as you've been taught to do, and then you'll draw it in. But go to the outside, the long side, to get that nice lovely curve and gesture. Measure to the inside to see how long it should be. Check your proportions on the inside. So the inside of the forearm should be in here. And that'll keep it working as it should, or at least a better chance of it. I'm not sure we'll get into a hand here, but notice how we get a gesture for the arm. We can also get a gesture for the fingers. Feel how those flow from tip to tip to tip. Probably going to want to make that a little higher up and smaller to get where we want it, but that's okay. Do that. And let's see here. Okay, so that's that. And scoot that shadow over there so it's something I can use in the composition. All right. That's me taking my sip again. All right, so what we have here is kind of a dark halftone in effect. So I'm just going to use the brown school. And then later, if I have time, and I probably won't, but if I do, I'll probably be able to do a little bit of it. I'll come in and push this into a little more color in here. But this is a good placeover. It's a non-color. It's gray, so it's going to tend to relate to whatever I've got going, especially if it's flesh that is warm. Having a warm gray, brown, is going to be just a thing in terms of getting it to harmonize. This is really more or less a gradation out of shadow back into light. So the shadow shape is in here, but I'll focus on the gradation rather than on the careful shape. And so I'm just plotting out my shapes, and we're in that getting to know each other phase. I'm not in a big hurry here. Just trying to feel where the key moments are going to happen and the key shapes and what the value, what the color is. The clearer you can be in your mind visualizing what's going to happen, the more successful it's going to be. If you just say, well, let's just see what happens. I'll get something that's dark for shadows, but I don't know if I'll do it bright or gray. It'll be something that's warm over here, but I don't know if it's pink or purple or orange. You do that, you're going to just kind of fuss around, and you'll try this, you'll try that, and probably it's not going to work very well. So it's much better to have a clear vision. So I will still do it from time to time. But what I'll tend to do, or what I used to do a bunch, is I would have out like 7 or 8 books. I'd have a Soroy over here to show me how to get the temperature shifts in shadows. And I'd have a Rembrandt over here to show me how to get that rich paint application and that drop off of light in the light side. And I'd do a Sargent for some of the expressive brush strokes and some of the drawing into the paint. And I'd have several things. It wouldn't necessarily have anything to do with the picture I was doing. It might be a landscape, but that I put down that I was when I was as inspiration when I was working on a figurative piece. But that would give me a sense of what I want, the visual components I want to focus on, and where I want to take those. Take a little bit of pigment out of there just so that we don't have to fight it so much. All right. Now, I'm going to work in a grayer range, knowing that I can sneak in bright temperature later. So I'm going to work the opposite than I worked the last time. Last time I started very intense, knowing that it's in some way I'm going to end up graying it out just by application, but just by adding stuff and working the paint and putting warms and cools and other colors in there and mixing and mixing and mixing, over mixing. It's going to gray it down. Here I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to start out very, very gray, and then I'll sneak in the color later. And also I know that that ground that I have here is going to affect the painting. Now look at how warm that ground looked, how golden brown it looked, and yet it's relatively greener. Look at how that's going green there. So that's going to be a problem I'll have to fight all the way through because of that. So I can do that in a couple ways. I can scrub it in and then wipe it off, and it's going to take some of that stain away. Or I can build it on thick, or I can just let it go green because that's going to harmonize it. Let's go ahead and rub it in and take it off just because I showed you that. So now I'm going to scrub that in, and it's like a stain remover. That color is going to come in on top and help me pull away the sludge. You can see why I'm so hard on my brushes. There's a whole way to work on a painting, a rub-out technique. I've done a little bit of demos over the years in these workshops, but not really. And it's a lovely way to work, actually. There's a lot to be said for it. And you're basically rubbing away, rubbing down to the white canvas to get to your highlights and lighter halftones. It's a fairly slow, meticulous process. So I'm not a slow, meticulous guy, so I don't like it for that, but I will use it from time to time still. That's what I'm doing here, in effect. And this kind of slows down my commitment to my painting, and so I'm still in that getting to know you stage. So that's also nice that I'm able to delay committing here. It can be a way of stalling a horrible experience that's about to happen, but it can also be a way of just kind of feeling these forms and getting to know the shapes and the character and the transitions and such. All right. Let's do one more here just to. See, I didn't get a good clean spot, but it's all wet, so it can all be moved. Okay, that's enough of that. I've filled the trash can, so I'm going to get going here. All right, and make sure that's fairly clean. So when I wipe that off, really squeeze so you don't have any or much turpentine down inside. You can see how it's stained from that red, but that'll be okay. All right, here we go. And this, you can see this brush is worn down too. You can see a good one there. See that little hair sticking out there, that little bristle? There's little guys sticking out all over the place, and it's going out and catching and making these disruptive little marks. And that can be a real problem. It's not for me because I'm going to come back with a negative shape and work on it. And I like having those little obstructions actually, where I have to fix. Sometimes they can really be annoying, and you had something that was really lovely and you lose it. There's always that risk, but that's a risk. But I prefer to have not have things that are a little bit troublesome that I have to deal with, so that I don't get too comfortable in my technique and get too formulaic in my solutions. So I want to really kind of have a process that keeps me on my toes on some level, even though I'm doing quite a bit of planning and conceiving. Now notice I'm getting a lighter and lighter touch, and I'm getting a natural gradation where there's less on the brush, more on the surface, and that's the advantage of not having a white canvas to deal with, but a canvas that's tinted. Now that tint is going to affect the process. In this case, it's helpful. I just had to fight it earlier, and now it's really helpful for me at the moment. So there's always a good and a bad out of this stuff. All right. And I'm building right in as I go this natural gradation here. And it's particularly useful, let's push it farther yet, it's particularly useful to gradate that hand down into the pink blood coming to the surface, because notice what's happening here. Let's do this even farther, kind of overdo it in a way. I'll show you what I'm talking about. We'll bring some of that in here now. So before I get back on point here on why I did that hand the way I did it, notice when I lay this in, I try and be expressive. The shapes are pretty accurate, but I want to go down that long axis, and then I want to fill in whatever way it is comfortable to fill in. But I want these shapes to be expressive of either the energy of that area of the body or the actual design of it, and hopefully both. So make sure at this stage, as much as you can, you're going to change things, much as you can, without getting too tied down and feeling like you're going to have to then fill in around a careful drawing. We don't want to do that, but let them be beautiful, exciting, dramatic, unique shapes, any or all those things. Okay, so now look what happens when I bring that hip back up into a lighter value. Let's bring it into a really light value. Now the pink hand silhouettes against the pale white, off-white hip there. And so now we have a silhouette. If I lay this down and lay this over it, if they're roughly the same color, do it here, then I'm just dependent on the drawn edge and this slight turn of the form getting lighter and darker and the shadow shapes to do all the separation. But if I can make this part of flesh a whole different value than this part of flesh, as we did here, this little thing with all the blood in the surface is a very different value than this big thing with all the blood down inside. And this has caught sun over the years, and that hip has not gotten much of it, and that kind of thing. So that's very useful to be able to do that. silhouetting things. Okay, now I don't want to do any more on that than I have until I get the environment around it in. So, and one of the big influences on me were the structural impressionists, along with the Rembrandt, the old school stuff that I love so much. But Duveneck, Duven EK, I think, or AEK, something like that. Frank Duveneck and Thayer. Dewing I liked a lot. Dewing wasn't much of a draftsman, but beautiful designer of tonal compositions. Thayer, Abbott Thayer, was a fantastic draftsman. The Freer Museum in the Smithsonian owns almost all his work because Freer, the patron, was about the only guy who'd buy his work. And he did these just beautiful pieces. And they worked with that kind of Sargent-esque. They were in that same period as Sargent and Chase, all those guys. A lot of them studied with Jerome. So another really great artist, Henry Asawa Tanner, who was probably the best colorist of the bunch and best storyteller. He really used work. Now it seems a little on the cliche side for us moderns, but at the time it was, he was really thinking about what the art meant in terms of the big picture, in terms of concept and stuff, rather than just picture making. Probably the smartest conceptually of the bunch. But anyway, they had a real nice kind of dragged quality to their paint, so it had the energy of Sargent, but it didn't have the knockoff flamboyance of Sargent. Sargent was so facile and so gifted that it just seemed to come easy even when he struggled, and sometimes it became kind of it's just too easy. It's that's incredibly gorgeous, that kind of thing. And so, like a Whistler, who was not as gifted a draftsman, academic draftsman, would struggle more with how the paint went down, and sometimes that gave it more credibility to me. But anyway, I love the group. These guys, they didn't have the raw talent, but they had a lot of the energy that sometimes Sargent did not possess in his work. Just the not even the energy, the passion for discovery. The struggle to get what you see, rather than just it being a gift from the muses, kind of thing. And we'll use a little trick of the trade here to make her sit back. We'll make her head a little smaller than it should be. It'll idealize it a little bit and give it the idea that it's far away from us when it's really not that far. All right, so let's search out what we're going to do for that kind of taupe background. It'll be somewhere in here, but yellower. And probably grayer than that, because we want the flesh to seem rich. I'm not going to put a ton of color in the flesh. I'm working in that more brown school range, at least at the moment. So I'll keep this a grayer version, but I'm going to keep that same transparent orange, that glazing, that dark yellow, relatively dark yellow. The most important thing is the shadow. So when I'm really trying to, not the shadow, the value. when I'm trying to figure out what color that is, I don't look right in the middle of the reference. I look to the edge where it meets these things. And how dark is it? It's about that dark, I'd say. Notice the advantage of having that toned canvas. If somehow I don't bump my silhouette up against the other silhouette, I don't have white jumping out at me like I do down here. And that keeps it more environmental. The atmosphere, the mood, the environment is based on getting rid of that white and giving the correct colors and values. Okay, and then I'm going to let it cool off here. I'm going to let it go more to the straight gray. This way, just to create a difference. I love gradations because life is change. To me, it's a lovely metaphor for change in action and evolution, possibilities, all that kind of stuff. Just set up for a second, take a look at this from a straight on view. So decent. And I'm going to basically use the same color I'm using for the dark hair here to just so those colors relate together. See what we have there. Not sure what that is. Probably just a piece of drapery. But we'll lose that. And each one of these folds, stroke, 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 this little stroke in there. I want to make each one reminiscent of the other. They're all drapery folds. But each one have its own character too. So they all get fatter and go thinner. And they all curve, except for maybe that one. But they all evolve in different ways. That's going to keep it interesting and organic and ringing true. just because I don't like the way that arm ended. I'm going to let it go off to the edge there and get lost in detail. So that means extending that a little bit. I used to actually work quite a bit on plywood. And then if that was going to be my composition, I'd go out wider, 3, 4, 6 inches wider, and that would give me room. Then once I've painted it, then I'd take my frame, I go, oh, okay, that's where I want it, and I'd crop off a little more or less than I planned here, just that, and then that would allow me to fine tune my composition at the very end once everything's in there. All right. And I'm going to just do that to the hand just so I can kind of feel the hip correctly once I get to it. Okay, and then once again, within the silhouette, the respect for that value that I've established and observed, then I can get some warmer and cooler variations. In this case, I'm going to do some cooler variations. I'm going to let it get cool up in here. And just by doing that warm and cool, that's going to give us the suggestion of complexity, of lifeblood surging in different colors and oxygenated and unoxygenated blood. And it's so complex I can barely say it. That's how complex it is. And that just lets the audience know that it's a big world. Even though we're painting a little bit of it, it's a big world, and that you have some control over that. You get it.
Well, the great thing about NMA is that each teacher brings something that adds to how you approach the art. I especially love Steve Huston. His is very ordered and structured and very repeatable. That's what's really exciting about his courses is he produces gorgeous stuff, but he shows you exactly how to build up to that.
All right, so let's bring in a little bit more pink. Into here. Again, I'm going to the big picture stuff, trying to get that to work with the big gradations, the big masses, and not get too caught up with the little stuff. As I say that, I do a little thing, but just trying to figure out how to make this edge interesting, suggestive of all the lovely rhythms that are going on without rendering them out. So I don't want a lot of information at the edge, and it's hard to do half a form when you don't have it in complete. You don't have it completely available to draw through and draw around in your composition. Let's see, that was where I was looking. There we go. All right, let's see here. Let's get again, at this point, I'm just searching for a little bit of interest in there without getting too much information. It didn't work so well, so we'll get that corrected by the negative shapes. And sometimes I'll get a big old wad of paint in there and let that just get interesting, just for paint's sake. And I might do a big area. I won't do it here because I spent so much time fumbling around with it. I won't have time to finish it, but I'll get a big area of paint and nice and thick. And then I'll let that blend into the surrounding. What was I going to say about that? Oh, and then for example, for the boxers, especially with the Workman 2, I'll let that actually be scar tissue. You know how if you get a really nasty cut, it will grow back thicker. The skin becomes stronger. Same with bones, unless it's a joint. It's an interesting metaphor. When you're injured, the tissue grows back stronger than before. It craves the injury, in effect. And isn't that an interesting metaphor for, say, self-destructive behavior or whatever, wherever you want to use that? But I use it in the boxers to show that's not that abstract thick paint like you might see in a Rembrandt is actually has a story to tell. You know, it's actually not actually, but I mean the mythology of that would be that it's damage done. All right, let's see here. So now I'm letting the paint strokes do their own thing. Whatever is the most functional way to get the gradation or to get the effect I want, that's what I'll do. And then I can let the strokes go. I know Sargent's going to go this way, so I'm going to go this way instead. Or I'll pack it with energy. So maybe I'll take this and this. And I'll scoop it on, scoop it. And let that get crazy. And then I'm going to define that by the negative shape here. Wasn't paying attention, didn't notice that the fingers had shadows between them. That's okay. So they're telling me I got to wrap up here and saving me from my horrible hand here. Okay, so last lesson here. Is so I've got that hand stuck in there, and it's pretty god awful. If you gave me another 6 hours, I could probably save it. Or maybe not. It's kind of an awkward view for the way I like to draw hands. But it's I picked it, so. But here's what we'll do is try and get a sense of the gesture. So how do we get out of the wrist and into the hand? And how do we take that, those broken shapes of the fingers and the palm, we have these light and shadow patterns, and bring it back into the leg. And you can do that by broken edges and by gesture. So let me and by kind of an echo. And that's still not going to save it completely, but if I spend enough time just kind of doing what I did here on the arm, or let's say here on the body, I can soften that edge or lose that edge, and then let the audience figure out where that edge should be. And they'll help me out a little bit. So if I just kind of vibrate that a little bit. So you're not sure where it's at least it gets it, brings the energy into it, and hides the trouble. Like so. Now it's a little less of a interesting, ugly paw than it was before. Or I could put a boxing glove on it. All right, so let's stop there.